And we are live. Good evening, Flagstaff, all of our LBE family, wherever you are. Thank you so much for, first of all, for your patience. We are starting our live stream a little late this evening, a little later than we normally come to you, but nevertheless, we are here, present, and accounted for. Excited as always. Good evening, Sister Khara. How are you?
Good evening. I'm well. And yourself?
Good, good. You know what? I'm not ashamed to let our viewers know. I forgot that I did not acknowledge my feline friend that resides with you under your loving care. And so I'm going to dedicate this live stream to my feline friend, and I know that they hear me, and in an effort to acknowledge their presence and to keep them calm and hopefully quiet throughout this live stream, we acknowledge the feline, which is not unusual in Egypt. This was a practice, and the feline is a very spiritual uh, being in the Egyptian culture. And so, in the spirit of Black History Month, that makes sense. But I'm excited about tonight. We have some very special guests. And I guess we're introducing them to our LBE community, these two sisters um, who are dear and very special. And I think the LBE project is very blessed to be connected with these two soulful sisters. And with that being said, Sister Kara, I'm going to go away and I'll see you at the end.
All right. Well, welcome to everyone who's joining us this evening. As Ms. Bernadine shared, we are very excited to be bringing you two very special guests this evening. Joining us tonight will be Ms. Kafi Dixon and Ms. Nicole Morris. And I'm going to share their introductions, and then Ms. Morris will be beginning with a presentation, followed by a conversation between herself and Ms. Dixon about the work that they are doing in a community that is becoming sister to our own in Boston. Ms. Kafi Dixon is the first to be introduced tonight as an African American woman farmer and cooperative model developer. Ms. Dixon founded the Common Good Cooperative, an urban farm and housing co-op for women. Through the development of equitable and democratized cooperative models, the Common Good Project is a radical self-initiated community health hub that re-envisions placemaking and centering through the lens of cultural competence and empathy for Black and Brown women. With experiential and relational understanding, Ms. Dixon brings oppression of all women to the forefront towards our gender liberation, and most recently is the co-producer and one of the main subjects of the documentary film A Reckoning in Boston. Also joining us tonight is Miss Nicole Taylor Morris, pronouns she, her, hers. She is a womanist bioethicist, scholar activist, doula, and movement chaplain, and healer in progress. She is a graduate of Harvard Divinity School with a Master of Theological Studies focused on the intersections of Black women and communities' health, community-centered healing, and the role of spirituality in wellness. She is also an alumnus of Tufts University, class of 2018, with a BA in community health. She is a capacity building consultant for Common Good Cooperatives and provides administrative support for the Tamir Rice Foundation. So welcome to you, Ms. Morris. I know we will be welcoming Ms. Kafi here shortly, but I will turn it over to you and start showing your presentation here, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khara and Ms. Bernadine. It's wonderful to see you both. And hello to the LBE community in Flagstaff. We are so excited to be sharing just a part of our work with you all. Kafi was able to visit Arizona earlier last year, give a screening of the documentary A Reckoning in Boston, as Ms. Khara mentioned with her bio. That documentary is currently streaming on PBS if any of you would like to watch it. But in that visit for the screening and for a subsequent panel, Kafi returned with so much joy and just feeling really connected to the community of Flagstaff because of your strategic plan. So I'll let her share more about how we've joined forces and are continuing to build a relationship with the leaders of LBE so that we can see what that strategic plan might look like in Boston as a way for the Live Black experience to exist in that community in Dorchester. So before Kafi joins us, I'd just like to introduce the Common Good Project, which is part of the larger organization Common Good Cooperatives. It's a multifaceted community health initiative, as Ms. Khara shared, and we've got many moving parts to it, but we just would like to give you a brief introduction to that. So next slide, please. So before we get started, I like to start with some grounding activities. So just to give you all an overview, the Common Good Project is located on the tribal land of the Massachusetts. And in addition to that, we also deeply acknowledge, we know that this is a space of actively making and creating Black history and Black futures. But we also recognize our enslaved African ancestors that stewarded the land in Massachusetts and probably the land wherever you are as well. So please take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous and enslaved ancestors that stewarded the land wherever you're joining us from today. So please do that while you're also taking a few deep breaths as we begin the conversation. So I'll provide a few moments for that. All right, thank y'all. Ms. Khara, next slide, please. All right, so who we are. We did give a brief introduction. When Kafi joins us, I'll let her share more about herself and her journey and anything that she'd like to add to that brief introduction. But just to give another quick overview, Kafi Dixon is the CEO, lead farmer, and founder of Common Good Cooperatives. And Common Good Project, as I mentioned, is just one facet of this. It's an urban farm, housing, and health hub, particularly for Black community, but with a particular focus on Black women. We realized that, well, Kafi and community members realized that there is a deep need for space for Black women to be able to speak to some of the harms that happen in terms of structural, interpersonal, and communal violence that goes neglected in cities like Boston. And that's where part of where this project was born from, and I'll let her speak more to that. In terms of how I come to this project, I actually started working with Kafi in 2017 as an intern with her organization. And just, as a student in Boston, I'm originally from California. And so I was a transplant to Boston, but really felt disconnected from the culture of Boston, being in an urban space that was very hyper segregated in terms of there's several train lines, and you could feel the difference and see the difference on the train, on the red line, as you're leaving the areas where the universities and colleges are, and then entering the neighborhoods, Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, where there are more Black community members. And I remember that being a really isolating experience and searching for places where I could continue to grow as a young Black woman, as a scholar, as someone who's really interested in figuring out what community health looks like, particularly for Black women and Black community. And really, I was able to find that space with Kafi, and we've been able to work together to really just do some amazing things. And Kafi has led all of these initiatives, and I'm just really grateful to be supporting that with capacity building. So that's where I'm entering this work from. Next slide, please. So in terms of just a snippet of the project, as I mentioned, it's multifaceted, but a major piece of this is the urban farm work. So as this describes, it's an urban farm startup, which is important. We realize as we're having a conversation with LBE, we also want to acknowledge that there are so many ways that the way that we build as community, as Black community, is often controlled by what we're exposed to, what we see. And something that that Kafi really wanted to emphasize when she started this project was that we can exist outside of the nonprofit structure. We know that there are many organizations that do exist in the nonprofit structure and thrive there, but that's not necessarily possible in certain spaces. And particularly in Boston, we recognize that there is a nonprofit complex that kind of controls what happens and how it happens. So it's very important that this is an urban farm startup. And the Common Good Cooperatives does exist as a B Corp and a certified B Corp rather than a nonprofit, because we believe Black people should have money and should be able to profit from our labor and our interactions with one another and our existence. We create so much of the culture and do so much, and it's important that we honor that so that we can maintain generational wealth. Something that is highlighted in that documentary, A Reckoning in Boston, was a study that came out a couple of years ago about Boston's generational wealth gap. And I believe it was $8 for Black families. That was the rate of generational wealth versus a couple $100,000 for white families in Boston. So that is an extremely stark gap. So this is something that we definitely recognize as absolutely important. So I'm going to pause for a moment. It looks like Kafi may have joined the chat. So Kafi, if you are here and want to share, please feel free to join. I was just giving a very quick overview of why the Common Good Cooperatives exist as a B Corp rather than a nonprofit. Yes, but if you want to give a brief intro and dive right in.
I thank you for having Nicole and I. Thank you, Nicole. And I thank the women of LBE for asking us back to talk a little bit more about our work. As I understand that LBE has made foundational strides that we believe should be uplifted nationwide. One of the things that we look at is the work of the co-op as well. Not my work in particular, but the ongoing work of the co-op in the future as being foundational as well to African-American communities and the African-American experience. Why is the Common Good Project not a 501c3? Quickly, I do believe that 501c3s have a huge space within marginalized communities and African-American communities. But I also believe that 501c3s may not provide the equity that's required in the communities. Here in Boston, we have thousands of 501c3s that have been around for many, many years and are in juggernauts in the charitable spaces or charitable workspaces. But we still have the same problems that have been in place since redlining. And like LBE, one of the things, the light bulb moment for me many years ago, about 6 years ago, was that we need a new revisioning of how we create truly sustainable, equitable communities. And to go back to our history as Black people and what the cooperative meant in Black communities for stabilizing themselves against racial violence. So where we're stabilizing ourselves against racial bias at this point, my thought process was in thinking about how women of color engage in cooperative work, were that there are many other social ills that follow along with racial bias and marginalization. We have climate justice, we have environmental violence, we have domestic violence, family violence, community violence. And one of the things that has happened, unfortunately, in a lot of the major cities and urban areas is that we've been fractured in how we come together to push back on that violence. And even furthermore, and even worse, we've left those decisions on how we deal with the spectrum of violence into people who don't necessarily experience violence the same way we do. So I look at Common Good Cooperative as a resolution-based model that, again, is equitable, that provides space, voice, and design to African American people as a specific class of people who have a specific relationship with American culture. And as far as the other spectrums of violence, when we start looking at how we are impacted by climate change, by environmental pollution, what that does to our body, our health, illnesses that we typically didn't experience in our community before, maternal health rates that are in line or worse actually than third world countries, that we as women need to come together and start being resolution based in our communities, in our conversations, and provide different models of intervention. And that is essentially Common Good Cooperative. I'm sure Nicole has spoke to you about the model, an overview of the model. We are, oh, you haven't? Okay. An overview of the model is really simple. We are a cooperative house for women, self-subsidized. And on that self-subsidized co-op house for women, we also have a co-op urban farm for the women as well. Not necessarily to work on solely, but to access fresh food as one of the pillars of healthy mind, body, and environment.
I think that this is actually a great time for us to bring the slideshow back. Thank you, Kafi, for, of course, your stunning introduction.
I'm sorry, yes. You did here, but thank you.
So just to kind of give us a little more grounding as we continue the conversation forward, just a very brief mission and vision. And I know that I have some things written here, but definitely please, Kafi, share what feels right to share with this community, with LBE. I was just speaking to how the strategic plan is something that we definitely are excited to be in partnership with LBE about, and speaking to some of just the how we were very honored to see the ways that they're approaching some of the same structural issues of neglect and challenges that they're facing in their community as in Boston.
And I'd like to add to the LBE strategic plan. I remember the innovation of it, looking it up online during a talk by Sister Deborah, and like not even being able to control myself in the moment of like, why don't we know about this nationally? And coming back from Arizona, I may have even called Nicole and some of the other women while in Arizona, humbled by the work that's being done in Flagstaff with the strategic plan. And our intention to beg to make an ask of LBE to use the document potentially to inform the work of other organizations here in Boston, and even in our intellectual progressiveness, seeming to miss a mark that LBE's been able to hit with laser focus for supporting African American communities in their lived Black experience. But I'll turn the rest over to Nicole.
Thank you, Kafi. Can we see the next slide as well, please? Yes, so as Kafi was speaking earlier, just about some of the overlapping disparities that brought her to this work based on personal experience, observations in community, and as a researcher herself, part of what brought me to this work definitely was, as I mentioned, joining the space through the lens of being a student who was studying community health, particularly related to Black women's health, and just feeling really terrified, quite frankly, about the state of Black women's health in America, thinking about my community and my family back in California, as well as what I was experiencing and observing while I was in Boston, and searching for a space where things didn't feel just so terrible and unresolved and disappointing. And quite frankly, there are so many community initiatives that happen because of neglect on a citywide level. And as I mentioned, I was just very honored to have a professor connect me to Kafi, Dr. Ona connecting me to Kafi, and really just seeing hope and being inspired by the fact that there are organizations that exist that acknowledge the experiences that we face daily and that are doing something about it and finding ways to be innovative and creative and work with one another. There is, the saying in the Black community, making a way out of no way. And that's really what this project has done from the jump. And of course, we are actively always searching for resources because, as I mentioned before, part of not being a nonprofit is making sure that we are compensated for our labor, but also, just at the core, making sure that holistic wellness is there, that it's possible, that folks can see it, can feel it, can be in community with one another, that we do find solutions to things that feel impossible to address, that we do find places for healing, for community, for talking about wellness, for creativity, for creating our own futures and realities. So this is at the core. We prioritize community wellness in every aspect of the work. That comes from not only having one-on-one conversations with one another, really checking in, also having group conversations, making sure that folks are okay, even during the pandemic. We'll get to it, but part of Kafi's work during the pandemic was really, providing resources to folks in terms of food security during the pandemic and accessing food by delivering some community shared agriculture boxes to residents from the urban farm space. But in that, even the eye contact, even the interaction from 6 feet away or 12 feet away or 20 feet away, even with your mask on, just that eye contact is so significant, and letting people know that there's care there, that we see you, that we acknowledge you, that even in a city where, and in places where it's easy to get lost as a Black person or neglected as a Black person, that there's a community that's always thinking about you and that always sees you and honors your experience. So this is what brings us, this is at the core of our work. And this, everything that I've been describing comes back to my conception of womanism, just really centering Black women at the core of what it means to exist and be well. So,
and also to also be a resource for each other. Unfortunately, our society, American culture, has done a very good job at fracturing us in many different ways. When we talk about spectrums of violence, in a lot of communities, gone are the nana or the grandma, the mama that lives a few blocks away, and your aunts that are in walking distance, your sisters and her family, even a trusted friend. Gone are the days where churches were a short drive or a short walk from the neighborhood that your family lived in, and that children ran around the corner for a moment because mom was running out to a supermarket. I remember writing a 13-page report for a large foundation where I knew that it was just above their head, and talking about linger longers and the importance of a linger longer in the backyard, under a tent, or the basements of churches. And that's something very specific to African American culture, that information that's shared there. So the intergenerational work of reconnecting and reintegrating with each other as a resource towards our own, not just liberation, but our own mental health and our own survival.
Absolutely. All right. Next slide, please. And I'm not sure if this is happening for y'all, but it looks like Kafi's camera might have cut out a little bit. So hopefully she will be back on, if it's not just on my end. But in terms of past and current initiatives, just to give y'all just a little bit of an overview of what we do. So as Kafi was mentioning, modeling safe cooperative space for community centering and placemaking is so important. We know that housing is important, that food access is important, but really at the center of everything is that community building, as Kafi was just sharing, resource sharing, seeing one another, being there for one another, and helping folks through, because we know that there are spaces that don't necessarily want to see us thrive, but really making sure that we can create spaces of thriving for ourselves. Community mental health and mediation support is also a core piece, really thinking about the ways that we can relate to one another as Black women, as Black community members, and really thinking about what it means to live in a system that doesn't necessarily want us to convene. What does healing look like for ourselves when these conflicts come up? What are the factors that are influencing those conflicts? And at the core, how can we find and retain that love and care for one another, really at the core, and find common ground? As I mentioned earlier, we also had a COVID-19 response, just in light of what's going on. And that COVID-19 response did involve actually providing food. This is an image. All of the images you've seen so far are images of the actual urban farm at the site in Dorchester, in Boston. And the paper bags are just an example of what kind of a CSA share looks like, just putting together these bags of fresh produce sourced directly from the farm. But as I mentioned, it was so much more than actually delivering those bags of food. It was also caring for one another. It was also checking in. It was, during the time of getting ready to vote in 2020, have you registered to vote? Are you interested? Can we convince you? If not, all of that, how can we be a resource to one another? Another piece is youth engagement. So really finding space, as I mentioned, this is a space for Black community, but with a particular focus on Black women and Black girls. So supporting Black girl leadership, supporting Black girl innovation. There was a group of young Black girls who just were able to explore the farm space, dig their feet into the earth. And as Kafi and I both mentioned, like part of this is coming from our work through community health lens, and knowing that there is actually a physiological benefit to literally your feet touching the land, and knowing that if we can facilitate that early on for youth, that's really important in a space that doesn't necessarily have tons of green open spaces for folks to do that. Yeah. Did you go ahead, Kafi? Do you want to add anything right now?
And I apologize. I am technically challenged with keeping my devices charged. Who knew my computer would give out at me at 26%, but now we know. I wanted to share this with the Facebook group. And I gather that joining us tonight are other women of color, and that this is a safe space, and holding space with other women of color. I want to be clear about this. And I've come to the point in my life where as Black women, we always come to these moments within our life where there's clarity. And in that clarity is a release of any shame or guilt. I look at what you're seeing now in those bags and those vegetables that are grown. Nicole comes to this work in a community health lens as an academic, and a brilliant academic at that, and acknowledging what she's done in her life, right? In in the beginning stages of what it is to be a young woman, in her 20s, who came through the ivory halls of Tufts and Harvard, who was provided information that women like me on the ground, who don't have high school diplomas, who have not had access to collegiate libraries, who were on the ground and just knew intuitively within our bodies that something wasn't right, and that things for us were not getting better, but actually worse. I want to be clear in this safe space with my earrings, my necklace, my dress, my extensions, that I am a farmer. And for many years, I was told, in knowing that intuitively knowing that a lot of issues that the women were having was not just about access to food, but access to space to grow their own food. But I, as a Black woman, did not look like a farmer. I did not look like a grower. I did not look like the woman who went out there on that quarter of an acre lot and built all those raised beds with some drills and drywall screws, and a delivery of lumber from Home Depot. Nor did people see in my breast and my hips and my skin complexion and whatever else I consider an accessory to my brown skin that I love and hold dearly. Nor did they see me or any of the other women as the ones who moved that soil, moved that compost, seeded those crops, tended to those crops. So it's only in communities of color that I release myself from any the burden of being able to say that an academic and a farmer, both Black women, came together to join forces, to launch an initiative that was one long overdue, the first of its kind in our community, but also groundbreaking in the simplicity of our approach to the health of Black women. And as I bring that up, I'm bringing that up, but hopefully that somewhere in this audience or on YouTube, that this story won't be told incorrectly in sharing this space, but that some woman somewhere will understand that we are important to each other in many facets. And even in LBE creating space for this conversation is a deep importance and dedication to, again, the lived Black experiences of many communities around this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for naming that, Kafi. As I've mentioned, I'm so honored to be in this work with you. And as you were speaking, I couldn't help but think about some of the archival work that we did early on, just thinking about community members that founded this work, as you said, from a deep knowing in their bodies and their hearts with one another, that there were resources that they did not have access to that were available maybe to other folks in other parts of the city, in academia, in high towers of downtown Boston, but not necessarily in the community. And thinking through
foundations, right?
Exactly.
And resources which are embedded in land, right? Health and financial sustainability.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going, the sustainability. And unfortunately, Kafi and I were able to locate about 10 organizations starting from maybe the 60s, 70s in Boston that were Black women's health projects, where a group of Black women or an individual Black woman or a group, just saw a need, felt a need, and tried to do something and did do something and impacted their community. But because there was a lack of sustainable funding, a lack of investment from the larger bodies of Boston, because of gentrification and so many other things that take over the spaces that we create for ourselves. They were in a way lost to the history of Boston, and it was beautiful to be able to uncover some of that work and see it, but also really disturbing how deeply we had to go to uncover that work and find those initiatives, or learn that some of these larger organizations that exist in Boston now are actually born from these initiatives started by Black women there, whose names are never acknowledged. So we are absolutely honored to be in community with LBE, and we want to continually uplift this work that y'all are doing. It's so important to us, and so important in general to the fabric of what it means to be Black. And really, do what we can to support and uplift your voice, because it's important that we exist. It's important that our stories are told and that they leave a lasting mark, so that, you know, they're not lost to the histories of who wants to create narratives about us. Yeah. Did you want to add anything, Kafi, right now? All right. Next slide, please, Khara. Thank you. Well, that was all from us. Here's some contact information. So please do feel free to reach out to us. As Kafi was sharing earlier, she is a farmer, and that is her in all of her glory right there.
Still with my bamboo earrings on. I still no shade. And I think the one thing I want to add is that just an encouragement to continue to exist in the space how we are and in all of our beauty. Our culture is often lifted from us, whether it is the hair extensions, bamboo earrings, nails, whatever it may be that is part of our culture and how we exist in our glory and our beauty. But, you know, to not give that up, to make that commonplace, to do the work as we are and not to fit in. I spent many years wondering whether I should carry around a mason jar cup and drink bulletproof coffee out of it, or whether I could just roll up with my Dunkin' Donuts coffee or whatever else coffee I drank in that space and be accepted. But it wasn't about being accepted in anybody else's space. It was about creating a space where we were, right? It was our space. It wasn't a question of whether there was acceptance or not. The acceptance was automatic because it was designed by us. But yes, those are my water boots. Thank you.
Thank you. So that is the end of our presentation for now. And happy to take any questions, but also Kafi and I, we're just really excited to be in space with you all. So please, anything that you'd like to address with us.
Well, first of all, let me just say, wow. I mean, thank you both for sharing all the work that you're doing in Boston. It's awe-inspiring. It's heart-stirring. It's heart-rending. It's and heartbreaking in many ways. But it's such important work that you're doing, and we are so appreciative of you both for joining us tonight. So I'm going to dive into some questions, and I invite you both to just answer as you're comfortable. We talked right at the beginning about the importance of healing and safe spaces, and so I want to ensure that this remains that for both of you through this conversation. And that's actually part of the very first question is you both have spoken and shared a lot with us with the LBE Project about healing spaces and the importance of safe community spaces, particularly for Black and Brown women. And I'm wondering if you can share your definitions of what is healing space and why is it so important to our communities?
Feel free, Nicole.
Okay, thank you, Kafi. Thank you for that question, Ms. Khara. As you were speaking, I was thinking about this idea of self-care and the way that it's been monetized and, you know, co-opted by folks in yoga pants, by white and non-POC folks in yoga pants, just saying like, yes, self-care, bubble baths, and whatever. And while, you know, we know that doing things for individual maintenance and feeling good as an individual is important, I'm just thinking about the importance of community care and how that in itself is healing space. As Kafi mentioned, and as I mentioned, I came to this work with Kafi as a student, as someone who didn't grow up in the community of Boston, but was searching for a community, searching for grounding there. And I remember feeling so lost and trying to figure out how to balance myself as someone who's just like, you know, trying to figure out what it means to be a young adult, a college student, and just so many other things happening in life. And what was really healing was finding folks that looked like me, that cared about me, that I could feel the care in a very palpable way. These are people that actually see me, don't just see me as a student or as someone to add to a brochure, but someone that's thought about, someone that's part of a network of folks. And so when I think about healing space, I think about what it means to connect with one another in a real way. It's been hard to do that virtually, but I think about like food and meals and what it means to just be in space with one another. I remember one of the first meetings that I had with Kafi, she made me a soup in her kitchen. I don't know if you remember that, Kafi, but you like made like fresh tomato soup. And I just remember like it was literally warming because Boston is freezing, and I'm very glad that I no longer live there right now. But it was also just very heartwarming, just to feel cared for in that way. Just thinking about the importance of food and gathering space and to heal together, to be with one another, and the history of that in Black communities. So.
When I think about healing space, I think about quilts and the hush arbors in the woods of plantations, where Black people were supposed to be worshiping their religious texts, but were sharing in conversations of joy and hopes of liberation along with their worship. Unfortunately, whiteness makes demands on Black bodies, regardless of our intellect, our power, what our perceived wealth is, what our perceived importance is, that there are always demands. Whiteness, not white people, whiteness makes demand on our bodies. And there has to be a way to decompress, to feel safety, to deliver ourselves from the perceptions of what it is to be a Black woman or the archetypes of what it is to be Black in America. Nicole introduced me to Kimberly Crenshaw's writings about intersectionality. And where on the ground, most Black women of my class, my education, may not have conversations about what intersectionality is, to be able to explain and share the definition of intersectionality, to be able to share the definitions of what it is to be gaslit, to be able to share the definition of social determinants of health. And being able to share those concepts, those words, those understandings, it again provides a tool towards resolving those issues and resolution of that pain, of that oppression, of that worry and concern is what healing looks like, to not carry those burdens. We may not be able to heal women from unfair predispositions of breast cancer or infant mortality, but what we can do is we can bring them to our space. We can talk to them. We can sit in circle. We can be present to each other. We can share our experiences, and we can look at resolutions. We can have those conversations over a warm bowl of soup. And Nicole, I remember cream of wheat, but I don't remember the tomato soup, but I will trust you on that because I know I make a mean vegetable soup. So.
You know, I have to say, you almost just completely took me out, Miss Kafi, when you were talking about that, though, and you, Miss Nicole, about just the beauty of that connectedness with the making of soup, and then you, Miss Kafi, bringing up that sacred space of quilting and the spaces that our enslaved ancestors made for themselves. It's such a beautiful representation of the endurance that we've seen in our community in particular through time. And one of the things that I really loved at the beginning of your presentation was that beautiful and inclusive land acknowledgement that you shared. And I wonder if you can share more about where that statement came from, and the significance of sharing that shared Black and Indigenous heritage of land stewardship and that interconnectedness there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khara. So definitely want to acknowledge, as you mentioned, the intersections of Indigenous and the history of enslaved Africans and the intersections of that as it exists in America. And that statement is actually like a conglomerate hybrid statement that I crafted, just putting together both the acknowledgements that our Indigenous siblings have created in acknowledgement of Indigenous lands and making sure that that's continuously emphasized, especially, you know, as we're a land project and also just as we're folks that see the intersectionality of all of our liberation. But then also seeing and feeling, you know, that the history of our enslaved African ancestors is less acknowledged in those statements, especially with the intersection of Blackness and indigeneity, and wanting to really make sure that both of those are emphasized. And I think something that's important in that statement is also just really taking a pause, something that we speak less about, but definitely shines through in the work that I share, but I know is underlying to the work that Kafi does, and not as vocally. But is that there is a spiritual dimension to everything that we do. We're continuously honoring the ancestors, continuously acknowledging that even though we're able to imagine so many futures and push towards creating those futures, that our ability to imagine comes from our ancestors who imagined themselves outside of the situations of enslavement, that and everything else that has come with the history of Blackness in America. So that's where that came from. Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful. Can you both share with us about the importance of and the work you're doing to honor your experiences and control your own narrative?
And I'd like to thank Nicole and Dorcas and Myosha and Dr. Fernando Ona and so many other people. And I'm sorry to jump back in so quickly, Nicole, but I thank you for the question, Khara. You know, I think people forget, I think the way that Black culture is quantified, right? For the conception of all, right? Through a capitalistic lens, we easily forget that that culture is an undergirding of our experiences. And there are many people who speak to Black experiences, again, without having them, and write books about Black experiences without ever knowing them. And I have not been able to get past the importance of Nicole and I and so many other Black women speaking about our experiences without somebody uplifting somebody who does not have Black experiences, but may have written a book or had a seminar or teach a class, and for somehow, some way, they become, right, more of a reflection of our Black experiences than we are. And it literally, and it's heartbreaking when people, again, become the officiators, I'm sorry, lack of a better word, of a lived Black experience that they haven't lived. And I haven't been able to get past that as of yet, right? But there is an importance around lived Black experiences in a culture that's not quantified solely under Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter because there's a lived Black experience that is valuable to this country and valuable towards the guidance of us forward in a society's liberation as women of color come out to vote in political elections as the same roles of white Republican men. And I'm not saying whether it's there's a good or bad of being Democrat and Republic. What I'm saying is that Black women have continually liberated this country based on our lived Black experiences, witnessed through our own experiences, and witnessing the experiences of our Black men, our daughters, our sons. But we're marginalized in a way that even to be able to say this is the resolution based on our experiences, and sometimes very private and intimate experiences, that's still given to somebody else, right? The acknowledgement is given to somebody else. But the lived Black experience is the culture of Blackness. As it's been going across social media, and it's so beautifully said in a very simple way, the smell of the hot comb on a Sunday morning before church or on a Saturday night, to walk into somebody's house and to know what a hot comb smells like, right? To know some of the experiences of the teachings of our grandmothers, of our grandfathers, right? The family that celebrates the hybrid Christmas and Kwanzaa, the beliefs of our family, those are all part of our culture. And that's not something that anybody could, if you haven't had that experience, should be able to speak towards. But American society every day marginalizes our voices and provides that space and opportunities to others, and often overlooks us, and then wonders why problems haven't been resolved or why these things are still ongoing. I'd also like to just say in summation, one of the things that Nicole talked about in finding so many organizations within Boston that were started by Black women and taking over by large white boards is that those women died in poverty at very early ages. So there was an ask of their bodies that their bodies could not manifest, and that their lives were not just diminished and marginalized, but shortened. And if we think of so many of the freedom fighters for voting rights, for women's rights, for birth rights, they have suffered the same expense. That is a lived Black experience. So if you don't have that oppression that weighs on your health, how do you speak towards health interventions or resolutions in the way that they should be to assure that we don't continue these experiences into future generations of Black women and in their health?
Kafi, that's hard to follow. I think that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. As just to briefly follow up, as Kafi was saying, just recognizing the way that our voices as Black women, as Black people, is continuously marginalized and exploited for the purposes of whiteness, for the purposes of culture producing in this country and capital producing in this country, is part of why we exist the way that we exist as a cooperative, as we mentioned earlier, B Corp, is to be able to recenter and reground the voices of community, the voices of folks that are experiencing things in our daily lives. We believe in horizontal leadership. Everyone is a leader. Everyone is autonomous. One of the things that that Kafi emphasized to me, like as soon as we met each other, was she told me she hates the word empowerment. I remember that, and not because that word is not powerful, but because saying like, you know, that you're going to empower a community says that you have the power to give to them. And although we as Black people have power that has been suppressed, that power always exists within us, and we don't need anyone to give us power. We already have the power. We just need the opportunity and the spaces to use our voices and use that power. And part of our mission is making sure that we're constantly creating spaces for folks to speak to their own experiences and craft their own narratives and craft their own futures. Another quote that I'm going to share that Kafi shared with me more recently when we were talking about traveling. And I know she's like, what did I say? But we were actually talking about what it.
I don't lie because my memory is so bad. I will never be able to defend a lie. Go ahead.
Yeah. We were talking about the importance of traveling actually for Black folks, and thinking about ways to make travel more accessible for Black folks. And something really powerful that Kafi was saying was that when we travel, we have the ability to see and experience a world that is not shown to us in our everyday lives, particularly as Black Americans. And that felt so potent and powerful. Because it's true, when you are able to step out of places where you're hyper marginalized, where you're feeling the stress of it all, just step into another space and say, like, this is another way that my Blackness can exist. This is another way that I can exist and be valued and be seen, be heard in a different space. It's really powerful and important. So,
and it's very important to the future of the co-op as well. For us, one of the things that I continue to talk about in the panels, and I know for some of the audiences, it's jarring. But if we really are, the amazingness of the strategic plan that LBE has created is that it does provide a roadmap. Because without that roadmap, prior to the LBE's strategic plan, I was turning towards revisioning what segregation looked like and questioning whether segregation was actually desegregation was something that helped or hindered African-American communities. And I'm not the only Black person who's been questioning that for many, many years. The conversations are often suppressed. But every time there's a murder of a Black man or a Black woman by a white officer, we have to question, was desegregation all that it was supposed to be for us if we have made ourselves even more vulnerable and our community even more fractured? But when we think about violence, I think one of the reasons that we're so willing to accept violence or willing to accept our station in life is that we've been conditioned and indoctrinated to think that that's all there is. But it's not until you travel, it's not until we bring women outside of the country, outside of their spaces, their towns, their cities, their neighborhoods, their communities that they have fashioned into families, and show them places where there are African diaspora, Black people in their beauty and the depth of their culture and color, owning businesses, having stores, farming, owning restaurants. Do we move people from the bubble that we're put in to daring to dream about, once again, like our grandparents had dreamed, about our own self-actualization and resilience through economic development, through community building, through community design, and a reliance on Black communities? It doesn't mean we're excluding other communities. What it means is that we're reclaiming the power that was for, again, our generations and our ancestors, where things weren't always good, but you knew when you went home, you knew when you went to your neighborhood, you knew there was safety. When you walked back into that neighborhood, when you crossed that street, you knew your neighbors. You knew if you lost your job, if you're that as a wife, that your neighbors would help you. And that's something that we haven't experienced, that so many people haven't experienced. But in seeing yourself in other spaces, seeing reflections of you in other spaces, in other communities, it becomes an example of what is powerful, what is possible. And that's powerful for us.
Absolutely beautifully said, both of you. Thank you so much for that. I have to be honest, I have so many more questions, but I want to be so respectful of your time. And I know we're coming to the end of our hour. So I want to wrap up with a question that you, Ms. Kafi, noted as being so important to you in this conversation we were going to have. And that was the importance of really engaging the local community, the audience that's watching right now, and having that question asked of what can we be doing right now to engage in this. So I'd like to use that as our closing question. What's the call to action maybe for anybody who's watching right now in terms of getting engaged in the community, in terms of supporting Black women and communities of color or neighborhoods, or whatever kind of localized efforts you can envision for anybody who's watching?
I hope there's not too much blowback with this. One is, if you haven't already offered your support to LBE and the amazing women behind LBE, please do so. And in doing so, you are living out the vision of what all of our organizations and work could mean, the power of that, which is a collective resource. The next thing is, Arizona is very specific and has been on my mind and heart for many a months. To come together with LBE, and I speak out towards you. We have our work in Boston, but I'm speaking towards the audience. There in Arizona, in Flagstaff, or the cohort that is. To make sure that LBE stays strengthened as we consider what it is to reach out to our Indigenous brothers and sisters and our new American Latinx brothers and sisters around the political climate that's going on right now. There are many things that are going on in society that are threatening any sense of safety that the Black community, especially Black women, may have around their bodies, as well as their ability to participate in voting. The same intellectual, deep intuition that went into the LBE Strategic Plan exists in other ways of creating movements, of starting movements. Your support of LBE as an organization initiated by Black women, work of Black women, of communities of color, is a resolution. But it's a resolution and a tool that you'd have to use. So right now, in acting in solidarity with LBE, I ask the audience to support LBE and moving forward and assisting so many other people in Arizona and ensuring that they have the rights to teach their history of Black people, to vote people in office, to have voting rights. As we look at how your voting districts are being chopped up at this point and isolated. In solidarity, I speak for LBE and to ask you to continue to support them. And in the meantime, if you decide that you want to jump across the state to Boston, we have a meetup called the Women of Color Meetup, the Women of Color Co-op on meetup.com. Please, in solidarity, join that meetup. Hopefully, in the next couple of days, I'll see 20 people have joined that meetup. It will keep you in tune with some of the things we're doing. We also have a crowdfunder called the Common Good Project on I Fund Women. And the next thing is to please, if you feel like these conversations are important with LBE and with the Common Good Project, and you and your organization would like to continue these conversations, to consider bringing us back. And these conversations are so important, and this is the work we'll have to do together as a collective, but it does start with us. My last thing Anytime you hear them talking about a Black farmer in Massachusetts, can you call my name, please? Can you say, you know, a Black woman named Kafi Dixon who's farming in Massachusetts? Because erasure is real. And just like those women who started other initiatives, we can easily start something very powerful and easily be marginalized into non existence. So call out the name of Khara House, of Deborah, of Bernadette, or Bernadine. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Dr. Evans, LBE, the Common Good Project. And don't let anybody forget it, please. And do not let us be erased, as we are doing very foundational work, if not historic. Thank you.
Beautiful. Any closing thoughts from you, Ms. Nicole?
Thank you, Ms. Khara. I'd just like to thank the LBE community and all of you as leaders of LBE for welcoming us so warmly. We deeply appreciate you and stand in solidarity and gratitude, as Kafi was saying. So definitely supporting your work and uplifting your work is a priority and my call to action as well. I'd also like to emphasize that as folks are watching, listening, engaging, there's so many things going on in the world. It's very important that you find your niche, find the thing that sparks you, that makes you feel inspired, that makes you feel good about your existence. Find the things that in spaces that help you to heal, that make you feel like a life like the life that you want is possible. Um, Part of my check-ins with Kafi are not only about the work, but also about how we're taking care of one another and taking care of ourselves and community while we're doing the work. So I also know that this is a hard time for a lot of people, just existing as Black folks, existing during a pandemic, existing in this space as movement builders, as change makers, in a world that seems to continuously be changing in ways that are harmful and predatory to our existence. So really finding spaces that make you feel good, make you feel whole, or allow you to seek wholeness is really important. So I encourage you all to continually check in with yourselves, check in with one another, and really lift each other up in love. Like something else that I'd like to share, don't be afraid to say that you love each other. I love you, Kafi, and I love you, Khara, and I love you, Miss Bernadine, and I love the LBE community. Just it's so important that we acknowledge that we love each other. We live in a world that tries to tell us not to love ourselves or one another. So yes, and then lastly, I'd just like to close with a quick quote by Octavia Butler, who I really love just for the ways that she envisioned different futures through the lens of sci-fi. But a really popular quote: all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So that is the quote that I hold dear from Octavia Butler. And thank you all for being change makers.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Khara. Thank you, Bernadine. Thank you, LBE.
I'm speechless. I truly am speechless. This has been such an important, beautiful conversation with both of you. And I have to repeat, Ms. Cole, I love you. Ms. Kafi, I love you. Ms. Bernadine, I love you. Ms. Deb, Dr. Coral, the LBE community, nothing but love. And I hope that as we wrap up this conversation and invite, as always, our audience to continue engaging, that is the point that you find entry through, is that point of love and change making and being part of that movement. Just you've said it beautifully, and that's truly all there is. So
can I say something really quickly, Khara,
absolutely.
that I forgot to say, and I apologize, caught up in the beauty of this moment. It is our intention still to invite the LBE community to Boston. Boston can learn a lot from LBE and from the strategic plan. And as we work towards making this plan or asking LBE to gift this plan to our organization here in Boston. Part of that gift will be to continue that conversation, not just in Flagstaff, but here in Boston, Mass, and to make sure that your work is uplifted and highlighted. Again, not just in Arizona, but that it is used by other major cities, again, as a foundational historic document. So the LBE community, again, I extend the invitation to come east and to come join us in Boston and to sit with some of the progressive institutions that see themselves as the end all be all and to lay your document on their table as it should be. And we thank you again.
Ms. Bernadine?
I am full, and I love you, uh, Sister Nicole, Empress Kafi, and I love you, baby queen. And I, I was so happy to. It filled my heart for you, Sister Nicole, to say I love you. Oftentimes we find ourselves in these spaces and feeling ashamed or um, being hesitant to say I love you. And so this truly is a blessing um, to share this space with you, to be connected with you, which all was divine and how it all came together and is still yet coming together. And bless you both, and bless your feet wherever you walk, and bless your hands to whatever work you set out to do, and bless your voices to always speak truth um, in all spaces, wherever you are, and at all times. Um, this is just the beginning, I would say. We definitely, you have a home here in Flagstaff, and we have to give honor to um, our chiefess Deb. She is the elder of our community that keeps us together and uses her wisdom and foresight to guide us and to teach us, and even sometimes to scold us when we need correcting. And so bless us all in this work that we have said, send us, we'll go. Um, with that being said, LBE community, thank you for joining us wherever you are this evening. Please come back. But until then, go in grace.